In this section, we will be talking about 3D layers in After Effects. Let's create a shape. Now I get to my star tool and I draw a star and I want to turn it into a flower. So I get into polystar path. At the outer roundness, I increase it. So it turns into a round flower. So right now I close everything and I move my anchor point to the center of the shape and I get to my align and move everything into center. Right now I go back to my selection tool. And if you take a look at here, I have my transform and all my transform has X and Y figures. And here is actually empty. How are we going to turn it into a 3D layers? Basically, you can get into this box kind of icon, which is 3D layers. And at the box here, you just turn it on to activate. You can see that all the attributes added one more sections and our rotation turns into orientation and there's X, Y, and Z. If you take a look at here, your axis turned into green color, red color, and a blue color in front, which is pointing towards Earth. And when we hover our arrow, we will be able to see that this is Z, this is X, and this is Y axis. So in our viewport, we will be able to see that the types of renderer that we have classic renderer or cinema 4D renderer. We can choose the camera view. Can we have front, left, top view, back view, right view, bottom view, and the custom views that we want. The viewing layout, you want to have one view, you can have 2 views, 3 views and all. But in After Effects, normally we will just open 2 views. Let's change the one on the left. When I click on the viewport, you will be able to see that right now this viewport is selecting with the 4 corner with a blue triangles covering it. I just go to my view pop-up. I go to left, which is my side. If you take a look at this, you will realize that in After Effects, sometimes we call it 2.5D rather than 3D because the depth is actually 0. And normally we have a layer. Our layers look like paper, but it's in 3D environment. Let's take a look at the attributes here. We have position, and this is X. I undo it. This is Y. Undo it again. And this is Z. Z, when you drag the figures, you will see that it's zooming in, either go towards you or away from you. And scale, same, but at the Z depth here, there's no changes because there is no depth in it. We just put it back. And orientation, this is X, this is Y, this is Z. And basically it orient along the axis. This is orient or rotate along X-axis. Undo it. This rotate along Y-axis and rotate along Z-axis. So if you take a look at the rotation, are the same thing as the orientation. So this is the settings that we can play around with. And you will be able to see that there's this geometry option, which is in constraint. We cannot choose it because we are in classic 3D mode. And we will be able to see that there is material option. Since we are already in 3D mode, we can cast shadow, accept shadows, accept lights when we apply lights into the scene. Let's go to layer and new, I can add a light. So this is the spotlight. You can have spotlight or point light. I can choose point light. I just put my point light in front of the object and you'll be able to see that there's this lights affecting the shapes. And I can hold down my Ctrl D to duplicate the layers. And at this point, I can move the layer to the back. And right now, I can see that both layers are affected by the lights. And now I go to the both layers and I expand it. Right now, cast shadow for the first one. I select, turn it on. I turn on the cast shadow and accept shadow, accept light is on. So I turn on the cast shadow as well. And right now you won't see much things. Go down to my light here and I realize that I need to turn on the cast shadow at the light. So you won't be able to see the back image because of the shadow. you just pull it out, push it further, you will be able to see the shadow casting at the back. So first off, you need to turn on the cast shadow at the light so that After Effects knows that the lights is actually casting shadow, and you need to turn on accept shadows and accept lights in the layers. And right now you have the darkness, you can reduce the darkness into 50%, and you can increase the shadow diffusion so that it looks more natural. This is how material option is when you get into 3D. Since we have 3D layers, we can move it around and see the perspective view. So when I'm selecting the active camera, I can go to custom view. Custom view, you will be able to see a perspective view of your layer. In this view, you don't need a camera to view the perspective. How can we rotate, move, and zoom in at this viewport? This is the rotation, or we call it orbit around cursors. This is move tool, and this is zoom tool. So let's take a look. When I click on this, I can rotate at this custom view. So at the custom view, we can move it, we can zoom it. Other than doing this, I can hold down my C. Once I can rotate it, I press my C again, I can move it. I press it again, I can zoom in and zoom out. So this is how you can use your camera to move it around. So let's head back to our active camera, which is the front. Once we turn things into 3D layers, we no longer can snap our anchor point to the edge. Let's take a look. We have this pen behind too. We cannot move it while holding our control. You won't see the box around the anchor point, and you won't see the anchor point. What you can see is just the axis moving around. So even if you click on this snapping tool, you won't be able to see the anchor point. However, you can always go right click, transform center anchor point to layer content. It will still go back to the center of the shapes. In After Effects, we have two types of 3D renderer, which we mentioned just now. And let's take a look what is the difference. So right now we have a layers over here. In Classic 3D, it's always flat, and we realize that the geometry option is off. But when we turn it into Cinema 4D, you can have the geometry option turned on, and this geometry options is for you to control the extrusion of the depth. Meaning that if you have a shape layer or a text layer which have contents, you can turn your renderer into Cinema 4D and extrude the content. So this is all about 3D layers in After Effects.